Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Well, hello, it's Zoe, and welcome back to the show. Super thrilled to be here with you, and there's a lot going on on Planet Human. Oh my goodness, we have ChatGPT 4.0. Have you been playing with it? It is super fun. So we have ChatGPT on my phone, and you can open it up, press the little headphone icon, and have a conversation, an actual conversation with the bot. And they ask you how you are. They actually respond to conversations. You can still use it as a search engine and processor of info. It still does that, but it can also get personal. And that's why people are falling in love with artificial intelligence, and particularly these AI companions. It's got its whole other issues associated with that. And it's some of the topics I explore in my novels, Olympus Bound, which is just released, just out in May. Very exciting. And I've just completed the manuscript for book number 3, Olympus Rising. So that's off with the editor. So now I've morphed from Planet Human into Planet Zoe. But that's basically what's going on, because what happens on Planet Human tends to feed into Planet Zoe. So yeah, ChatGPT 4.0, it is just moving ahead in leaps and bounds, and it is becoming an integral part of my business process in terms of how I process things, asking it questions, parse information, do strategic planning, you name it, as well as search for things like good book recommendations or movie recommendations. It does all that too. It's the best. All right. What else have I got to tell you? That's it from, more on Planet Zoe. Now that I have my fourth novel off to the editor for edits, I'm taking a break from fiction because I am doing research for the Power book. It is tentatively called Power Games. Very exciting. And yeah, it's going to be out, sometime next year. And there's a massive project associated with that. And I'm loving the information that I'm getting from doing the literature review and the deep dive on how power manifests in our leadership and what we need to do about it, because things are changing. All right. The other thing that's happening on Planet Zoe is I spoke this week at Inspire Women about power. And it was a powerful conversation because I think women have a different relationship to power. I'm not usually one to talk about gendered approaches in leadership. I think there's a case for it. So that's all coming out. All the power stuff I'll be writing about and blogging about. And you can learn more about that if you sign up for my newsletter on zoerouth.com. Click on blog. You can stay up to date with my deep dive articles there. So my question for you this week is, how can we improve our work by 10%? That's a massive number, isn't it? Well, my guest this week is Lauren Jones. She is an engineer turned systems productivity expert and author. She's got a book out on how to improve your performance by 10%. And we go into a deep dive on how to do that, exactly to do that. And I love it. It's a systems approach to business systems that you can squeeze better outcomes from. So without further ado, let's get on with it. All the way from Sydney, Australia. Welcome to the show, Lauren Jones.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Our beautiful neighbors to the west of us in Sydney. Let me ask you, how the heck did you get into this line of work? I love hearing how people ended up where they are. And so you're working in quite a little different cross-section of productivity, of leadership, of systems thinking. So how did you end up here?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Well, if I go back to, I was an electrical engineer as a student and a young graduate. I did electrical engineering, and I went straight from that into working in manufacturing as an engineer, chemical manufacturing actually. And I spent, over a decade, probably 13 years in chemical petrochem area, learnt a lot about engineering, but learnt more about business operations, all sorts of things. And in that period, I moved into an operations management role. So that was my first taste of management, if you like, and leadership. And also systems. Like, it was a really large organisation. It was, well, when I started, it was ICI. It became Orica and became many other names as sections of the business were sold to different owners. But being in such a large corporate, they had really good systems. And being petrochemical manufacturing on the edge of Sydney, where there was a shopping centre and housing right nearby, we had to manage every risk, everything very well, because we didn't want to blow up the suburb, if you like. So those systems became very much ingrained in the way I learnt to operate, if you like. Yeah, so I've done a bunch of things over the years since. I did some adult education type training and so forth, and did a bit of auditing. And that's how I got into the consulting, because I don't like auditing people, but I like helping people. And so the training and the consulting and the facilitation and the coaching that's come is the stuff I love to do, and because I love helping people either grow their business or grow individually. I think that answers the question how I got into it.
It does, yeah. And it's a big, long journey from electrical engineer to chemical manufacturing engineer to consulting. And it's interesting because my dad's a mechanical engineer, in aviation. And when you talk about that kind of brain, when you need to understand a lot of complexity and complicated processes, to then shifting into people consulting is, whew, that's like the other side of it. So that's an interesting pathway, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Look, it probably is. But, and that's probably why partly the people I'm working with, a lot of them are coming from a technical side of things. They may be engineers or some sort of technical expertise, and they're running their own business, or they're moved into management within a larger organisation. And so they probably get systems, like I get systems. And so, you can, I suppose that's the translation part. I see leadership, it can be a system.
Absolutely, it can be, yeah. A complex one, a dynamic one, but it can absolutely be a system.
And people, yeah, chemical plants are complex, so are people.
Yes, they are. That's right. So in your work, what are you obsessed with?
On a personal level, I'm obsessed with learning, moving, growing. And at a work level, I'm obsessed with helping others do the same. Helping businesses grow, helping people grow with their business or with into their roles, and setting up systems that help them do that easily rather than painfully.
If you can make growth easy and not painful, I'd love to hear that. That's awesome.
Well, it doesn't mean it's not hard work, but I was reading something actually just this week about sometimes the growth comes in the rest after the hard work.
Yes.
And so it's remembering to take that rest and allow yourself to grow, and you see that in the growth humps that businesses go through. As they get bigger and bigger, there has to be a pause while everything catches up. Otherwise, they collapse, and then they bring more and more resources or better software or better equipment or better this or that, and then they can grow again. You see that at an organisational level and at an individual level.
And that's something that I think we often forget. And I've had guests before that say, there's this continuous improvement cycle, this constant innovation that we need to be part of. And I was like, yeah. And what about just the consolidation phase, which is what you're referring to in the rest phase, how important it is, because every sort of biological system needs that kind of pause, catch your breath piece. And certainly our brains do. And it's not something that is often programmed into business cycles. And so it's refreshing to hear that yes, we can actually do that. It's good for our bodies, it's good for our brains, and it's also good for our business. There you go. Bodies, brains, and businesses.
There you go. The 3 Bs. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
And your latest book is called 10% Better, and it's about how to improve business processes. I'm curious how you landed on 10%, and is that achievable instead of like 1%? So you hear a lot about, for example, James Clear's Atomic Habits. He says, just be 1% better, and incrementally over time, it'll turn into a massive difference. So how did you land on the 10% thing?
Yes. Can I confess? Look, I didn't want to use 1%. I used 10% to be representative of the continual improvement process. It was when I started writing the book, I was pitching it, I was sort of writing it for business owners and leaders who are looking to improve their bottom line, and 1% wasn't going to be interesting to them in terms of a title. Like 1% improvement of your bottom line is like, nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, confession there, the 10% it's indicative of if you were to improve one thing 1%, you improve something 1% every day. That's a massive improvement. Over, in 10 days, that's more than 10% because it has an accumulative effect. It's not saying make things 10% better. It's actually saying you can improve what you're doing if you've got good systems. You should be measuring it, but you'll know like what that will be. So I was also trying to say, you don't have to be 100% better. You don't have to completely change everything. It is about continual improvement with those rest periods, and the accumulation, that exponential sort of effect from the accumulation of those various improvements you can make in different areas of the business. And 10% wasn't based on a particular thing will make you 10% better. So that was my little confession there.
Got it. Thank you for that confession. Tell me a little bit about measurement, and how do you encourage people to measure? What should they measure and how should they measure?
Yeah. Okay. That's really key actually, because when I started consulting, I was working in sort of quality management systems, ISO 9001 space. And I'd go into businesses and say, you know how to run your business, but you probably don't know how well you're running your business. You're not measuring how effective, how much rework there is, how many times are you going back and fixing what how many call outs you've had, or whatever how many failures or whatever the business is doing, And I particularly see this in the smaller businesses, but even in the larger businesses I've worked with, their core activity they're good at, but they don't know how good. And so there's no benchmark or for them to improve on. And so some of the measures are around that quality. So that's what I started looking at with clients, is measuring their quality performance. How many complaints are they getting? How many returns? How many call-outs, et cetera, et cetera. And then we expanded that to, well, look, how you're making your customer, how happy is your customer? Your customers are not just the end users. The customers are also the people working in your business. And so it's also about that internal measures of retention of staff and all sorts of things that you can, there's an amazing number of measures you can have within an organisation. You've got to pick the critical ones for where your organisation is at the time, because you can't measure, particularly if you're a growing organisation, you've got to work out, well, what's important to us in this phase? And so you can't measure everything. You get overwhelmed with measurements and you don't look at any of them. So, in the book, I talk about 3 key areas. The first being inspiring people, so understanding your why, if you like, why you're here, what the values of the organisation are, and are people really aware of that? Then I talk about empowering people through things like technology and making it easy for them to do their job, not hard for them to do their job, because I've seen, both sides of that. and giving people a go. And then the third element of that is the enhance. And that is where you start looking at your measures and start getting feedback. And this is sometimes the hardest part for leaders is, and I know I always found it hard, was I love feedback when it's good. But to have
I think we all love feedback when it's good, that's for sure.
Yeah, but when the feedback is, it wasn't as good as you thought, or it could be better, and actually being open to that and doing something with that. And so that's where I say, keep score. You got to have a scorecard, and you got to see how well you're doing as a business. And you can't have a million scores on that. You got to have a few key ones that are going to make the difference.
So you've recommended talking about how happy are your shareholders, whether it's your customers or whether it's your staff. Are there any other kind of fundamental ones that are really useful for any business at any phase?
Obviously there's all the financial measures, and I don't need to list them. I think most businesses are across them, though sometimes with the smaller businesses, it's interesting. Revenue, for example, revenue is one indicator, but actually, particularly if there's one business owner, if there's no profit, with any business, doesn't matter if it's private or not, revenue is one thing, but if they're not actually making profits, is the business going to be sustainable? So,
I have a friend who used to always quote this for businesses: revenue is vanity, profit is sanity.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. You could be earning $1 million a day and losing $1.5 million a day. And that $1 million a day doesn't mean squat if you're losing
that's right
$500,000 a day or $1.5 million a day. So I think, that's always, I think of money, or the profit particularly, has the pulse of your organizational body. Do you actually have a pulse, or are you bleeding out, kind of thing? And I think that's always got to be a fundamental there, because you can't play if you don't have the numbers right in terms of the financials. And then the people measurement, as you said, are pretty critical, because we're in service to other humans. And so if the humans that we're serving, either our staff or our stakeholders or shareholders, then they're going to walk away, and that will affect the downstream effect of the profits and money flow. So it's all quite interconnected. And we started this conversation about complexity of systems and complexity of people. So I think those are two useful things, our inputs and the outcomes of those on our people and our money doing the job they're meant to. That's probably as a good starting point to get a health check of what's going on. And then you can start to drill down on particular elements of your business and measure. For example, if you have a marketing campaign to try and build up new revenue or new customers, measuring different elements of that, say, for example, would be a useful short-term approach. So in your book, how do people go about getting that 10% improvement?
The first thing, and I sort of said, I had those three areas: inspire, empower, enhance. The first thing is making sure your people are on board. And this is at an organisation level or a team level as well. You can't do it alone. And so if you want to make improvements in efficiency, effectiveness, or any of those areas, you've got to bring your people on board for the journey. And so that is around understanding the reason you're a business and getting that shared within the team, and then having a clear direction of where you're going. So what is your longer term strategy? What is your shorter term plans? And building ownership there. Plenty of times I've seen sort of strategic plans or objectives set, but no one really owns them. No one follows up. There's a lot of doing going on. People busy doing stuff, but they're missing out on that. Where are we going? And then people aren't inspired. They're just turning up. They're not inspired to make change and improvement and growth. So it's about that absolutely knowing what you want that 10% to be, knowing what you want that change or that improvement or where you're going with that. Identifying that first. So that's that inspire piece.
Yeah. That's a absolutely good starting point to get people on board. And so is the recipe in your book then is inspire people, empower them, give them the tools and resources that you need, and then keep track. Is it as simple as that to gain the 10% gain?
Well, yeah, it is. And interestingly, I met up with a client a couple of weeks ago who I hadn't seen for a couple of years, and 3 years, and I'd sent her the book when I'd finished it, sent her a copy. And she said to me, the first thing she said to me when we had a video call to do some more work with her, and she held up my book and she had all these post-it notes sticking out of it. And she goes, "Oh, I love your book. I keep referring to it all the time. It's my go-to." And I went, "Oh, wow, that's good. That's a relief. That's good to know." So she's obviously seen the benefits within her team, and she's got a global team these days. The second step is around getting the right people in the team, of course, but then giving them an opportunity. Some of the things I was seeing with managers I was working with was they were micromanaging. They weren't allowing their people to fail. They weren't allowing them to succeed because they weren't letting go and giving them the opportunity to step up. And so that was one of the key lessons I put there, because I was seeing that. I was seeing both managers who were giving their people opportunities and they were growing, the businesses were growing rapidly. And then I was seeing others where there was micromanaging and those businesses were really stagnating. And so that's why I put that in there, because I was seeing it day to day with the clients I was working with.
It's really quite astonishing. People know that they shouldn't be micromanagers, and yet it seems to be a massive block for people to actually change their modus operandi and coach people to grow. What do you think is the big obstacle for people of letting go of the micromanagement?
Trust. I mean, I think trust is the main thing. The other part of it is, I suppose, understanding that by helping others grow, the whole team benefits. It's not a personal journey, it's the whole team. So building others up, it doesn't threaten the leadership or the management. It actually enhances it, enhances them, makes them look good, So sometimes there might be that they're being threatened that someone will outshine them, perhaps. I think that might still happen sometimes. And just trusting that people can actually step up and own whatever they're responsible for. So, it may be too much self-preservation instead of thinking about the bigger picture.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that's true. There's micromanagement is usually about covering one's own butt as opposed to encouraging others. And that self-focus is so detrimental, that self-preservation instinct, and it is an instinct. And it's not to cast shade on people.
No.
Because we've all been there. We are all wired for self-protection. It's about growing awareness about what is the impact that we're having. And ultimately, we want to have a strong impact. And if your data says by growing others around you, building capability in others leads to better business outcome that is good for all of us, then we've got to learn how to do this. I love it. And so it's hard to change people's minds about these things. And sometimes it takes an outsider to put a flashlight on and say, "Hey, have you looked at this thing?" When was the last time, or tell me about a time when you changed your mind about something? How easy or hard was it, and what happened?
That's an interesting question. I've probably got lots and lots of examples there, but the things that I think back about changing my mind, and I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I think I used to be ageist when I was young.
Oh, really? It's another confession today, is it?
I think I used to. Yeah, there you go. And the whole time in gender thing even. For example, when I first had kids, I went back to working part-time, and I had been in a management role. And I remember one of my peers suggested that type of management role couldn't be done part-time. And I sort of went, that was the 90s. No, it wasn't. It was 2000. Sorry, my first child was born in 2000. So there you go. 2000, 2001. And I sort of agreed. I went, yep, you're right. They need to be there every day. They need to be there all the time. But, even last week, I saw in the news there's 2 politicians who are running for one seat. They want to job share a seat in Parliament. And I just went, that is what we need. We need that to happen. We need those sort of examples of people don't have to work 60 hours a week to be effective, or however many hours a week. I thought back to that time and I thought, I gave in very easily then. I didn't feel like I could argue the case. But the reality is that was a 24-hour operation that was on a chemical plant back then. And so there's no way those managers were there all the time. They were only there during business hours. So, of course, that job could have been done part-time and job shared and different things. So, but I wasn't confident to challenge that back then. 20 years later, absolutely am. And I think we need to be challenging and changing the way. And we've seen so much change in that time, but we need to keep exploring it.
So what made you more receptive to the idea? I mean, it's 20 odd years later. So what do you think positioned you to go, oh, actually, is there something that you can pinpoint, or is it a gradual development?
I think it was, look, this particular example I think was, and that wasn't the ageist example. I didn't end up telling you that story, but I think this one's a better one. Look, I can't pinpoint a particular time except, and I know that job sharing was pretty average back in the day, actually, my experience with it. So it wasn't that I saw it done well back then, but I don't know, it's a whole evolution of the way people work now. And the fact that, in COVID we went from organisations saying there's no way you can work from home to all of a sudden everyone was working from home and all sorts of things like that. The change of my mind came about, well, actually we can do things differently to the way they've always been done. So, yeah, there was no one moment. It's actually, it's been a gradual thing.
And I think COVID just dumped us in a completely new paradigm where we were forced to explore new ways of being and thinking and doing. And I think that opened up opportunities for us to see things differently, which is cool.
Yeah, and that's probably the line in the sand where I really saw that change. But, I sort of stopped work for a couple of years when I had my third child, and then I went into a position, and when I turned up, the guy I replaced, so I was mother of 3, and the guy I replaced was a young guy who had no kids, sort of, I don't know, so just trying to give you the different ages. And I rocked in. I could do what he was doing in about 2 hours a day, and he was doing it in 8 hours a day. And I went, right, this is interesting. So it just opened my eyes to you can be effective the way you work as well. Or you can fluff around a lot.
Coming back to measurement, I think that's a useful tool to help us sharpen where we're investing our time and energy. Lauren, are you ready for the Fast 5?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Number 1, what is the future technology you most want right now?
I am not wanting to accelerate technology any faster than it's coming, but climate change mitigating technology are all too late. They should have been here already. They are here, but they should be well and truly embedded, in the energy sector, vehicles, all sorts of things. So that's what I'd like right now.
Good one. All right. Number 2, what is the best tip you ever got for leadership?
Lifting others lifts the whole team.
Oh, yep. Love it.
Build up others isn't a threat to yourself, like we were saying before.
That's great. Number 3, what's one problem in the workplace you'd love to wave a magic wand and have it be fixed right now?
The belief that the hours spent is related to the output, the value of the work. The belief that we have to work long days, long weeks, it's still there after, it's potentially in some sectors worse than it ever was. And so that it's not about the hours spent, it's about the quality of what you're doing.
Love it. All right, number 4, thumbs up or thumbs down. Who are you giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down to a leader?
This is a challenge because by picking someone who's in the public eye, I'm saying I don't know what they do and close up, but I'd say a thumbs up to Christine Holgate for a couple of things. I really liked her style with Australia Post, where she got around and went out to all those regional areas and understood the issues that they were facing. And she's done something similar at Team Global Express, understanding the problems there. So she's a real problem solver, which I love. But I heard her speak last year about that industry that she's in and how that they are one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions. And she was owning that and saying, we need to face that and we need to see some real change in the industry. And she had a real can-do attitude about that. So I'm really ready to watch that space and see what happens, because it's going to be a hard one to answer. But hopefully we see some change there soon.
And where is she now?
Global Express, which is also transport and logistics.
Awesome. Thank you. Number 5, what is your favorite leadership book or a podcast aside from the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast?
Yeah, well, this is a great one. Look, I would go a couple of books. Good to Great by Jim Collins is an old one, but good for business structure and systems reference. More recently, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, which is more about the people side of it. And so they're a nice complement to each other, I think. So they're 2 of my favourite books.
Awesome. Thank you. That was the Fast 5. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. See you there. So cast our mind forward. So you've been working with organizations in improving their business systems to get better outcomes for both the shareholders, stakeholders, and the bottom line. Where do you see the future of work?
Oh, look, it's going to be really interesting. It's going to keep changing faster and faster, I think, because I see more and more automation, less manual labour. I'd like to see it paperless. There's very few companies that have actually gone paperless, but they do exist. And the first one I saw was a decade ago, yet I still... so that's my little bug, my environmental bugbear. I'd like to see... So, yeah, I think there's going to be more systems that are providing automation and faster this and faster that and better. I just hope that it is better. I'd like to see less focus on hours and more focus on results, which is what I mentioned before. I hope that the automation and, things like AI, I hope they bring better results, better is a funny word, but, a better life for people and not introduce poorer quality and fear and all the other negative things that we're worried about. But I can see a lot of positives for the future and a lot of change, which we should be embracing and but also massaging, making sure it meets the future we want.
I think that's a very aspirational and positive view of the future, which is terrific. Now, Lauren, I know that you also, apart from doing some consulting work and working with businesses around their systems optimization and 10% improvement, you have some masterclasses. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I've done a bit of coaching with a few one-on-ones, but I do a bit of training. I love trainings. I do facilitation with executive teams, understanding risks and strategic planning and that sort of thing. But I also love training. It's fun. So I do train. I do a few things, and I've been running masterclasses on leadership, management and leadership essentials, if you like. So that's pitched at emerging leaders. And so people who have either just landed themselves in a management role and gone, oh my gosh, this is exciting. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Which is how I felt when I was a young manager. And it's also for those who may have been in a management role for a little while and are still going, I feel out of control. And so it's just getting back to some essentials, getting on top of the management side of things so that you can be freed up to be a leader is probably the best way to describe that. So, yeah, there's a public course, and I'm also going to be offering that to companies in-house if they want it.
And there's so many managers that I've spoken to who never got any formal training. And so they're stuck trying to bumble their way through and end up into the micromanagement self-preservation trap. So it's great to have that as a resource.
And that was the idea, just to help people get through that overwhelm and give them some, something to work with and help them enjoy their job instead of being exhausted by it. Yep. Fantastic.
Lauren, where can people find out more about you and your work?
So I have a website, laurenjones.com.au, and on that is my email and phone numbers on that website. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. Find me on LinkedIn too. So
ubiquitous platform for all things professional. Fantastic. We'll put the links in the show notes. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us a very pragmatic and positive view of business and the future of work.
Thanks very much, Zoe. It's been great talking to you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Always good to talk to Lauren and get down to the brass tacks and fundamentals of business management and improvement. And really, it's so simple as getting clear on what your direction is, getting people aligned to that, giving them the tools and resources they need, and tracking what's working to see what needs improving. I love it. So the key takeaway for me is self-preservation at the root cause of micromanagement. I think that was a really interesting observation and insight. And so my tip this week comes from my first novel, The Olympus Project, in chapter 54. And it's a quote from Athena AI in Wisdom of the Ages. And she says, "Trust is a byproduct of good systems. Set things up right and fewer things go wrong." And I love that as a compliment to what Lauren was saying about trust as one of the reasons why people don't let go of micromanagement. And I think the self-preservation, self-interest case feeds into a poorly designed system, and then you have micromanagement issues. But if you set it all up right and you have good systems for delegation, coaching, growth, and execution, then the trust element emerges naturally. Or so I hope. Coming up next on the show, we've got a great conversation with Mark Butler. Mark Butler has been on the show previously in the COVID times where we talked about burnout. And we touch on burnout a little bit and move to what's new in the world of self-care and mental health. And there's some really interesting things that are happening in that space that leaders need to be aware of and to be managing actively in their roles. So that's coming up next week. What else? If you like the show, tell me about it. Email me, zoe@zoerouth.com. Send me a picture of what you're doing, where you are when you're listening, because that's kind of fun and interesting to do. And also, if you like the podcast, tell other people about it. And if you like my work, buy one of my books. I'm on a book marketing campaign. Olympus Bound is out and it's receiving great reviews. So if you haven't got your copy yet, do so. It's a great, fantastic read and with lots of wonderful leadership challenges in there. Great for your business book club. If you don't have a business book club, email me and I can talk you through how you can set that up. And what else? Oh, yes, I'm about halfway through writing book number 3 the full-length novel in the series Olympus Rising. So, yep, coming up soon. So make sure you get on board, get fiction in your life. It's a fun and effective way to learn about leadership and life. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, and that means live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.